It's Christmas Eve. The snow is falling gently outside, and you're curled up in a cozy cabin, surrounded by twinkling lights and festive cheer. The warmth of the fire crackles in the hearth as you settle in for a peaceful night. But then, the silence is broken. A knock at the door, strange footsteps in the snow, a chilling presence that makes your skin crawl. Is it just your imagination? Or is someone watching, waiting for the right moment to strike? Could a festive getaway turn into your worst nightmare? Could the holiday season bring more than just joy and cheer? Tonight, we'll take you through 3 terrifying, true Christmas horror stories. Stories that will make you question what lurks in the shadows during the most wonderful time of the year. Don't look away, because you won't want to miss what happens next. But before we start, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you'll never miss a spine-tingling episode. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, comment, and share the video. And if you want even more, stay connected with us on our social media platforms for more creepy content. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. And now let's dive into the darkness together. It was December 2022 when my girlfriend Sophie and I decided to head up to the Pocono Mountains for a little Christmas getaway. We had rented a charming Airbnb, beautifully decorated for the season, with a cozy vibe and a lovely view of the surrounding nature. The property was large, nestled in the woods, and located just a short drive from a quaint little village. To add to the Christmas spirit, a snowstorm was predicted for that evening. So, we left a little earlier than planned to make sure we had enough time to stock up on groceries and get settled in. The drive from the city to the Poconos was about 4 hours, but we made good time. We stopped at a Family Dollar for some snacks and supplies, then headed straight to the Airbnb. We turned onto the gravel road leading up to the property, passing through a clearing in the trees. The house was tucked away in the woods, with a large deck featuring a hot tub, perfect for watching the snowstorm roll in. There were plenty of Christmas decorations around the house, including light-up reindeer, a large snowman, and giant candy canes lining the walkway to the front deck. We made a few trips from the car to bring in all our things. The place had a wonderfully cozy atmosphere, just like the pictures had promised. A Christmas tree sat in one corner, stockings hung on the walls, and smaller decorations were scattered throughout. The scent of wood filled the air, reminding me of a rustic cabin, though it was more of a regular house than a log cabin. I noticed a stack of firewood by the big fireplace in the living room. The house had 3 bedrooms, though we only needed 1. After settling in, I did my usual check, inspecting the fridge, turning on the TV to see if there was cable or Netflix, and checking the view from all the windows. Upstairs was a loft with a pool table and a couple of couches, and there was a basement below. Curious, I decided to check out the basement. It was quite large for the size of the house, but it felt isolated and unfinished, more like a place for storage than a space to hang out. Just as I was exploring, there was a knock at the front door. I hurried over to answer it and found a man in his late 40s, dressed in gray sweatpants and a worn yellowish-brown jacket. He smiled and greeted me warmly, asking how we were doing. I replied that we were good, and asked if he was the host of the Airbnb. He said his name was Jack and that he and his brother managed the property. He mentioned he lived just up the road and that if we needed anything, we should feel free to reach out. I thanked him, and he walked away. I thought it was a little odd that he knew I was with my girlfriend since Sophie hadn't come to the door. But maybe I'd mentioned it when I'd communicated with the host, Mike. It was already dark, and the snow was falling. We cranked up the heat in the house and started preparing dinner: chicken thighs, broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread. It was nothing fancy, but we ate on the couch with the Christmas tree lights casting a warm glow over the room as we watched The Polar Express. After the movie, we decided to take advantage of the hot tub on the deck. I turned on all the lights and decorations outside, and we settled into the bubbling water, watching the snow fall gently around us. It felt like a winter wonderland, but then something strange happened. The bubbles in the hot tub suddenly stopped, and it fell completely silent. We both heard unmistakable footsteps from somewhere on the property. Sophie and I exchanged uneasy glances. I was about to ask if I should shout, but she motioned for me to stay quiet. The footsteps moved away, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. I told Sophie it was probably just a deer, though deep down, I knew it was likely a person. After getting out of the hot tub, we went to take showers before bed. But something was off with the water. It turned ice cold after just a couple of minutes. We both jumped out of the shower in shock, and I messaged Mike, the host, about the issue. He replied after a little while, saying it was odd, and promised someone would come to check the hot water heater the next day. We went to bed after our cold shower, but around 3 a.m., we were awoken by loud, aggressive knocks on the front door. Sophie was visibly shaken, urging me not to go to the door and to stay in bed. To be honest, I was relieved that she said that. I had no desire to find out who was knocking at our door in the middle of the night. There were 3 loud, angry sets of knocks before it stopped. We stayed silent, sitting upright for a few minutes, whispering to each other. I eventually locked the bedroom door for extra security. After a tense half hour, we both fell back asleep. In the morning, I messaged Mike again about the knocks. He seemed just as confused as we were and said it was strange. He mentioned that if anything like this happened again, we should call the authorities. Not exactly the comforting response I was hoping for, but there wasn't much else he could do. Outside, the snow had piled up and the sky was still overcast. As I wiped off the snow from my Jeep, I noticed footprints in the fresh snow. They seemed to loop around the house, and I remembered the knocks from the night before. I wondered if they were from the same person, but the footprints were fresh. Surely, if they were from the night before, the snow would have filled them in by now. As I stood there, I saw Jack walking from around the corner of my car. I mentioned the water heater problem and told him Mike said someone would come by to take a look at it. He confirmed he knew about it and was the one coming to check it. I also mentioned the knocks from the night before and showed him the footprints. He just shrugged it off, saying there were a lot of strange folks around who like to snoop at night. I asked him if it would be okay to use the hot tub at night, and he assured me it was fine. As he went inside to check on the water heater, I decided to text Mike again. I told him Jack was here and that he was checking the hot water. Mike's response threw me off. "Wait, Jack? Who's Jack?" I quickly typed back, "The guy who said he manages the house with his brother?" Mike's reply came fast. "I don't have a brother named Jack." I rushed to Sophie and told her we needed to leave immediately. We quickly packed up our things and rushed everything out to the car, leaving behind small items like chargers, things that didn't matter. As I started the car, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Jack walking toward us. I didn't hesitate. I put the car in drive and sped off as fast as I could. On the road, I called Mike and explained everything. He didn't stay on the line long, but promised to call the police. About 20 minutes later, he called back, saying the police had been to the house but didn't find anyone. He was on his way there too, but was mostly calling to get more details. We spent the next few hours driving around, trying to calm our nerves. Later that night, Mike messaged me again, apologizing and saying he didn't know anyone named Jack. He was as disturbed as we were. What chills me the most is the thought that Jack had been watching us from the moment we arrived. He must have been the one banging on the door in the middle of the night, and who knows what his true intentions were. We're just grateful we left when we did. A few days before Christmas, around 11 p.m., my sister Ava and I were sitting in my mom's room, chatting and winding down for the night. Suddenly, my mom asked if one of us could grab her a water bottle. For context, we don't keep bottled water in the house anymore. My dad used to have the habit of opening a bottle, drinking a little, and leaving it half empty all over the place, which really annoyed my mom. So now, she keeps them in the car. Ava and I reluctantly agreed to go get some. I grabbed the keys from the kitchen counter, while Ava stood hesitantly by the door, claiming it was too cold outside and refusing to come with me. Frustrated, I headed outside alone. As I made my way toward the car, I noticed a figure standing motionless in the middle of the street. At first, I didn't think much of it, assuming they were just passing through. But when I unlocked the van and took a couple of bottles from the trunk, I realized the figure hadn't moved at all. It was standing still, its silhouette outlined against the faint light from the street lamp. A sudden unease gripped me, but I tried to ignore it. As I turned to head back inside, I saw that the figure was now staring directly at me. A chill ran down my spine, and without thinking, I bolted back up the driveway, slammed the gate shut, and rushed inside, locking the door behind me. I told my mom what had happened. She didn't seem overly concerned, but called my dad to check things out. When he came home an hour later, he went outside to see if anyone was still around. It turned out that the same figure was still standing there, motionless. My dad approached him and casually asked if he needed help. Only then did the man walk away without saying a word. A couple of days later, on Christmas Eve, my grandma asked me to drop off some cash at the neighbor's house. The neighbor owned a small butcher shop, and my grandma had left her wallet there earlier that week. I wasn't in the mood to leave the house, so I asked Ava if she could go instead. She reluctantly agreed, but said she'd go only if I stayed by the gate and kept watch. I stood there, watching her walk up to the neighbor's door. She knocked once, but there was no answer. After a minute, she knocked again. I stood there, tense, when suddenly, my stomach dropped. I spotted him, the same man from 2 nights ago, the one who had stood motionless in the street, walking up the block toward her. My hands tightened on the gate, and I silently prayed the neighbor would answer quickly. Just as he got within 2 houses of the door, the neighbor opened it. Ava handed over the money, exchanged a quick thank you, and turned to walk back. They were halfway up the driveway when I saw the man stop at the edge of the neighbor's driveway, now just a few steps behind Ava. Then, out of nowhere, he began laughing, a sharp, mocking laugh that sent chills down my spine. Ava must have felt it too, because she immediately turned and sprinted the rest of the way up the driveway. The man started running after her, but when he noticed me standing by the gate, he stopped suddenly, looked directly at me and grinned, like he was enjoying the moment. Then, he started whistling a strange, offbeat tune. Ava bolted past me and into the house, and I stood frozen as the man continued to walk toward me, still whistling. I silently begged him to leave, but he just laughed again, this time louder and more mocking. My heart raced, and my legs felt weak as he continued to approach. Halfway up the driveway, my dad stepped outside. He hadn't noticed the man yet, but the man sure noticed him. He locked eyes with me, his grin widening into something even darker, and said, "You got lucky this time." Then, without another word, he turned and walked casually across the street, still whistling, until he disappeared around the corner. I stood there, shaking, my chest tight with fear. Tears filled my eyes as I told my dad what had just happened. Furious, he immediately went outside to look for the man. By the time he came back inside, the man was gone. Later that night, when my dad took our dog out, he saw the man again, walking slowly down the street. My dad stayed outside, watching him, but the man never looked back. When my dad walked up to him and asked what he was doing, the man didn't flinch. He just smirked and casually walked away. My dad came back inside visibly annoyed and called the police. They arrived soon after and searched the area, but the man was gone. On Christmas morning, we noticed several police cars down the block. It looked serious, so we told my dad, who was friendly with that family. About an hour later, 2 officers came to our door and asked to speak with us about the man who had been hanging around. As they spoke, the horrifying truth came to light. The man had broken into our neighbor's house through a window, specifically the bedroom window of their 10-year-old daughter. He had tried to drag her out of the room, but she screamed, and her father rushed in just in time to tackle the man and beat him up before the mother called 911. The police arrived within minutes, and when they questioned the man, he admitted he had been deciding whether to target me or the girl at our neighbor's house. He'd been watching me for weeks, even following me home from school. He also confessed to going through our mail, trying to learn my name. The police told us he was a registered sex offender. He had taken an interest in me, but figured I would fight back if he tried anything. Hearing this made me feel numb. The officers asked to speak with my parents privately, so I stepped out of the room. I could hear snippets of their conversation, and whatever they discussed left me shaken for days. I couldn't stop crying, feeling violated even though nothing had happened to me physically. The thought of what could have happened haunted me for weeks. Though the man was locked up, I didn't feel safe. My home, which had always been my sanctuary, now felt vulnerable and exposed. The fact that he had planned to kidnap me, and even gone so far as to dig through my personal information, made me feel sick. Looking back, I realize how lucky I am that he chose someone else that night. Although it's a strange relief, this experience taught me to never let my guard down. You never know who's watching or waiting. Christmas has always been my favorite time of the year. The festive decorations, the twinkling lights, the warmth of family gathered together. But every year, no matter how much I try to embrace the joy of the season, I can't help but remember the terrifying events that happened to my family and me on one unforgettable Christmas. It was the winter of 2008, and I was just 12 years old. My family had decided to spend the holiday at my cousin's house, a beautiful home nestled far from the hustle and bustle of the city. We had planned to stay there overnight, since it was too far to travel back and forth. Their house had plenty of guest bedrooms, and we were all excited to share in the holiday spirit. That night, after dinner and some holiday games, we all settled in to sleep. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. Around 4 a.m., I woke up to strange noises drifting up from downstairs. At first, I tried to brush it off, but the noises continued. It sounded like footsteps. Soft, slow, almost like someone was trying to move quietly. But who could it be? My cousin and her family were all asleep, and my parents were in their room. I couldn't resist the urge to investigate. I crept out of bed and made my way down the hallway, my heart pounding. As I reached the stairs, the noises grew clearer. They were coming from the kitchen. I tiptoed down, trying to stay as quiet as possible, my breath shallow with nervousness. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze. There, in the dim light of the kitchen, was someone dressed in a full Santa Claus suit. His back was to me, and he was bent over, rummaging through the cupboards. He looked as if he were searching for something. Gifts, maybe. But the strangest thing of all was that he wasn't acting like a normal Santa. His movements were jerky, almost frantic, as if he was in a hurry. I stood there, paralyzed with fear, watching him for what felt like an eternity. There were only a few presents left under the tree, since most of us had already opened our gifts earlier in the evening. But still, this figure seemed intent on finding something. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. My mind raced, but before I could react, I turned and bolted back up the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I burst into my parents' room, waking my dad, and told him what I had seen. He groggily followed me downstairs, and together we entered the kitchen. But when we got there, the Santa Claus figure was gone. The kitchen was empty, and there was no trace of anyone. My dad dismissed it as a bad dream, but deep down, I knew what I had seen was real. I went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The unsettling feeling lingered, as though something wasn't quite right. The next morning, as we were preparing breakfast, my uncle went downstairs to grab drinks from the basement. Moments later, he came rushing back up, looking pale and alarmed. "The basement window's shattered," he said. "It looks like someone broke in." Panic spread through the house. My uncle called the police immediately. When the officers arrived, they inspected the scene and found nothing out of the ordinary, except for the broken window. They couldn't find any sign of a break-in, and nothing seemed to be missing. But my dad and uncle weren't convinced. They checked every room of the house, looking for any sign of foul play. After a thorough search, everything seemed fine, but we were all on edge. That's when things took a darker turn. A few minutes later, my dad and uncle came rushing down the stairs, wide-eyed and frantic. They had heard something coming from the attic. Without hesitation, they ran upstairs, and shortly after, we heard them shouting in alarm. "He's here!" my uncle yelled. "He's in the attic!" We all rushed to the kitchen, fear creeping over us. My heart raced as we waited outside, the cold air biting at my skin. The police arrived again, rushing into the house. Moments later, they emerged, pulling a man dressed as Santa Claus out of the attic. The sight of him sent a chill down my spine. His face was covered in dirt, and his eyes were wide with madness. As the officers searched him, they found a knife and rolls of duct tape in his pockets. The officers told us that we weren't the only ones he had targeted. There had been multiple reports of a man dressed as Santa Claus sneaking around homes in the area. We were the fourth call of the night. The officers explained that this man hadn't just been breaking into homes, he had sinister intentions. He was caught before he could do anything more. But the horror of that night stayed with us. I couldn't shake the image of that Santa moving silently through the house, and I'll never forget how close we came to something much worse happening that Christmas. Every year, when the Christmas season rolls around, I can't help but think about that night. It's a reminder that sometimes things aren't as they seem, and that not every Santa is jolly. If you've experienced a terrifying event or have a horror story to tell, we at AG Horrors want to hear from you. Share your experiences with us on Reddit, and let's uncover the mysteries hiding in the shadows together. And if you want to support the channel and help us bring even more terrifying content, consider checking out our support options on Patreon or Ko-fi. Your support means the world to us. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling stories like this one. And now, stay tuned for the next horror episode.